Amen. You know, one of my favorite descriptions of Jesus, he is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And I was sitting there while we were singing that song, and when it says that line, he calls me his very own, tells me I am his own. Now, if you think that doesn't apply to you, you're wrong. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. He calls you his very own. And he loves you with a love that you can't even describe. Wow. And he is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. And listen, I am honored to introduce a guy that I've known, Jason, for several years now. And the thing that I've always admired about Jason Davis, first of all, is his willingness to be transparent. I mean, what you see is what you get. He's got a bunch of different personalities. Did you paint all of these? He didn't. Well, they're Jason's personalities, but what you see is what you get. And his transparency has helped, I know, a lot of men get over that hump of just being transparent and just confronting that habit, that hurt, or that hang-up that they've had. I've heard many people over the years saying, wow, if Jason Davis wouldn't have shared his testimony, would not have been so transparent and open, I don't know if I would have ever come out and just, and confronted my stuff. And so, but that right there says what's in Jason's heart. I mean, he's got a big heart. He's got a big heart. And I consider myself blessed, and I know you do too, if you found a friend in Jason, and because he is a friend that would always be there for you. And so I'm honored to introduce my friend Jason Davis. You're a good one. I don't care what you think about yourself. I think you're good.
Oh, man. Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to meet that guy he's talking about one of these days. Oh, man. Well, I'm thankful for my brother Jeff and all my other brothers behind the scenes, too, because I definitely couldn't do it without them. And just bear with me while I fumble around. I came nervous, and I'll probably stay nervous, and that's just part of it. That's what you get. I'm trying to turn Siri on. Anyway, okay. I may have to read. Thank y'all for bearing with me. You don't really have a choice. I've got the mic and I've got the time. Okay. There it is. Okay. Let's see. Anyway, while I'm waiting, everybody here, if you don't hear anything else from me, can you hear me fine? They're walking around and all that stuff. Okay. I want you to hear what I have to say, but really, I hope that the Lord jumbles up my words and the letters and everything and allows you to hear what he wants you to hear about yourself, about something that you may need to overcome, something that you haven't talked about or whatever the case is. He made each and every one of y'all unrepeatable when y'all come through the doors on Monday nights. We just want you to know that you're special, that you mean something to us, no matter what you think about yourself or no matter what you've heard your whole life. So with that, I'm Jason Davis, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and I'm walking in victory over alcohol, pornography, sexual trauma from my childhood, and I'm just glad to be here tonight. Thank you. So, my childhood, I had a great childhood. I had loving parents. I grew up in Christian homes. There was no alcohol or drug use or abuse in the home. My parents were divorced when I was 3, but as I grew up, I thought, well, that's just, that's normal. Families do go through that. Not all families are like that, but that's the way my family is. My parents didn't talk bad about each other. to us, or I never saw them argue or fight. Like I said, I was 3 when they divorced, so if they did, I didn't see any of it. But the older I got, and now I realize, I did come from a broken home. No matter how normal I thought it was still a broken home. And I look back through the years, and I realize it did have an effect on me. In fact, good thing was both my families were in church. I had a brother, Jeff. He was 3 years older than I was, and we grew up in West Memphis, and we visited Jonesboro on the weekends to visit my dad and my stepmom. And we were in church when we were in West Memphis and when we were in Jonesboro. So we grew up, like I said, in good homes, and we were going to church. I remember when I think about 6 years old, I kept asking my mom about going up front, because I would see people come up front and pray with the pastor. And to Mom, I want to go up front. She'd ask me why I wanted to go up front, and I didn't really know why, but I just did. I felt a tug on my heart, and it wasn't long before I realized that I wanted to give my heart to Jesus. So she took me up front, and I prayed with the pastor, and I know sometimes, and that's something I dealt with all my life after that, just wondering if I really was saved by going up front and talking to a pastor, because I know that's not what saves you. But I do believe that I knew at that age that I needed him as my Savior. So not long after that, when I was in elementary school, I was exposed to nudity on TV. I would say pornography or softcore pornography, by staying up late at night. My brother and I were visiting a family member's house, and we were just up late watching TV. And I was probably 6 or 7 at the time, and I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was something that when I saw it, that it was exciting to me, even at that young age, or it was different. And so around the same time, there was a girl that lived in the same neighborhood around us that we played often, and at some point she I don't have it written down, so I really don't want to say it in any way that's going to be triggering for somebody or anything else, but that's part of where my sexual trauma came from, playing with somebody who where we would play doctor, and I would be exposed or things like that. And that happened for a while. Like I said, I was in elementary school, and around the same time frame, I was going from house to house, from my grandmother's to my aunt's house, and I found a pornography magazine just laying in the road. No one was around, so I picked it up and I went and hid it behind a shed. So I was exposed to pornography when I was very young. I didn't even know what sex was at the time. I just knew that seeing those things, there was something about it, later on in therapy, I realized that seeing those kinds of things at a young age is trauma in itself, because our brains aren't made to, they're not developed, and they're not made to see that kind of stuff. And really any age for that matter, but for a young child to be exposed to that kind of stuff is very traumatic. God didn't make us to have to deal with that, or our minds to comprehend those kind of things, So it's kind of like, and when I think of that, God didn't make our brains to comprehend that kind of stuff at that young of an age, when grief is part of, what I struggle with as well. And God didn't actually make us to have to deal with grief. When he created us for life. He didn't create us for death. So when sin entered the world, and death entered as well, that's why we have so much trouble with it, because we weren't designed to have to deal with grief and losing somebody in our life. So other than that, I feel like I had a pretty normal adolescent or a childhood. I always say even in the third grade, after I'd been exposed to all those things, there was some other kids talking about babies being made, and people had to have sex to make babies, and I didn't believe it. I thought there was no way that my parents would do something like that, because my mind was distorted. I did not know that God created it for such a beautiful thing and purpose. So anyway, moving on, I was in church the whole time. These were things I couldn't talk to anybody about, or at least I felt that way. And so I just stuffed them down. I hid them. And as I became a young teenager, I just like I found a porn magazine. It was about the same time I found a freestyle magazine. So freestyle magazine had freestyle bikes and freestyle skateboards in them. And so I loved that when I saw it, and I always had a magazine. I'd always be flipping through at school when I should be doing my schoolwork and those kinds of things. So that was an outlet for me when I was younger that I loved doing. I also liked listening to music, and this is mid-'80s, late 80s, and so I like music. I like, anybody ever make mixtapes or cassettes before CDs? Yeah. I would spend hours upon hours just making different tapes and whatnot. And I love doing that. I love different kinds of music. And so when I was a teenager and I finally started working, my first job was Baskin Robbins. Anybody else ever worked for Baskin Robbins? Yes, I see a few hands. That's awesome. Yeah. I worked there for 2.5 years. That was my first job. Was able to get a car and things, and so when I got my car, I was working on my car stereo to make sure it had the loudest speakers I could get in it, which wasn't very loud, trust me. I had a Baskin Robbins budget, and that was kind of the speakers I had, too. I mean, not Baskin Robbins speakers, but anyway. So let's see. So that being a hobby, skateboarding and music was a hobby of mine, and I did it enough that people began to take recognition that I was doing that. And I went to school in Florida and went to a tech school and learned some things. And when I came back, I was able to get a job at a stereo shop in West Memphis. And so I was about to say, I feel like I'm moving right along, but I think I have to move right along. So anyway, that's just, sorry for being nervous. Okay. I know I'm not going to be able to tell you my whole life story, you know what I mean? But that's what I feel like. I'm trying to get it funneled all the way through everything. But okay, so when I was working at I was dealing with the porn this whole time. I made it through my teenage years without drugs or alcohol, and my friends, they did turn to some of those things, and I just told my wife, I don't know, it's probably a couple of weeks ago, we would go skateboarding through town, and a couple of my friends, they started smoking, and so we were skating and they were smoking, and I was too interested in skateboarding for that. But anyway, so like late at night, we'd call one of the parents to come pick us up, and they were smoking and I wasn't, so they wanted to sit in the back of the car, so I had to sit in the front of the car with my friend's mom, and so they wouldn't she couldn't smell them. But anyway, so we were driving down the road, and I remember her saying, "Jason, have you been smoking? You smell like smoke." Anyway, so I didn't take the fall, but nobody got in trouble. But point is, I was, we can trust Jason not to be smelling like smoke. All right. So, but anyway, so I met who would be my first wife when I was working at the stereo shop, and we got married, and we had a couple of kids, and through this whole time, I did tell you that I'm free of alcohol, walking in victory over alcohol. I didn't buy alcohol until I was legal to buy alcohol. And, of course, it was peer pressure, whatever. And even at that age, But anyway, let me get the ums out. So with alcohol, I didn't do any drugs, but some of my friends were huffing chemicals and stuff, and so seeing them do that, I thought, well, they don't do drugs, so this this was probably okay to do. So anyway, that was pretty ignorant. I was huffing chemicals with them as well, and so just doing some dangerous stuff. And I remember one time when I was doing that, maybe I passed out or blacked out, but I just remember hearing this demonic voice inside me, and it's almost like I had a visual of my heart inside my chest, and hearing this demonic voice just talking to me, telling me that he was the one controlling my heart. And believe it or not, that didn't stop me from doing that that night. But things like that, I look back and I think, I wasn't honoring God with my life at all. But he never left my side. I could be dead by I worked with a guy who I now know that he was using crystal meth and whatnot, and he offered it to me when we were drinking together one night, and I hadn't done any drugs. I didn't even know what he was doing. I just knew it was drugs. But anyway, I said no, I'm good with drinking, and which really I wasn't. But anyway, I didn't do drugs that night. Is the point. But there's just little things like that I look back and I see that if I'd have just said yes to this or yes to that I might not be standing here in front of y'all. I laid waste to so much other stuff, though, through 2 marriages, actually. Just, when things got hard, I would turn to drinking. Alcohol and pornography, was something I would sneak and do if I was hurt. It was just an escape for me, And when that kind of stuff comes to the light, it's so hurtful for the other person. It's bad enough, when you have an issue like that yourself. I say that in all due respect because I battled that for 35 years before I was able. Through Jesus Christ, I was able to overcome it. My stereo shop, I jumped around a little bit, but I'll go back to the stereo shop. I worked at a shop, and I eventually owned my own stereo shop in Blytheville. And I went through a divorce at the time, and I had so much room in my stereo shop, I started selling skateboards, which was a big dream of mine at one time. So even though there was some things going on, I loved that. I went through a divorce and ended up having to close my shop because I lived in Jonesboro and was driving to Blytheville every day. So that was hard on me and the kids. And so after I closed the shop, I was working here in Jonesboro, and my dad came over on a Monday. It was President's Day. And I'm bad with dates. I know it was President's Day for some reason, but I don't know if it was 2007 or 2008. I think it was 2008. But he came over. He was about to go see my brother because he was sick. And when he got over to see my brother, he was so bad, my dad had to drag him out of the bed and drag him to the hospital. And that was on Monday. And Tuesday morning, my brother had already passed away. I think he was 34 at the time. He didn't battle with cancer. He didn't have a long disease. It was just something that happened over a few days span, and he was just gone. And so I sunk into alcohol and pornography just to try to ease the pain. And I just remember sitting in front of my laptop, going through music and just making, I didn't have cassettes anymore, so I wasn't making mixtapes, but anyway, you just don't know. I mean, I know some of y'all have had unexpected death in your life, and it hits you like a ton of bricks. Sometimes it's a lot more now than it was back then because he was my only brother. And man, if you have brothers, if you have sisters, make amends with them. If you don't, if you're not connected somehow. So through all this time, I was still in church, but I was still addicted to pornography and alcohol. I would be in church. I'd be at the altar, laying it all down at the altar. And then I'd be drinking my sorrows away the same night, wondering why I couldn't get past it. I'll fast forward to January of 2019. I tried to get sober, which wasn't the first time, but just saying, well, I'll put it down, and, a few days later. So 2019, I tried to get sober. I thought, I'm going to do it this year, New Year's resolution, so to say. And I made it 2 weeks. And I went right back to drinking. I was drinking 6 to 7 days or nights a week. I never did anything dangerous like drive, so I thought I'm okay, even though I knew it was wrong. That same year, I visited my mom for Mother's Day on Sunday, and instead of going back to the liquor store on Monday night, I stepped into Recovery at the Rock on Monday night. So that night I picked up a blue chip to put down alcohol, and I went into small group, and I sat with a group of guys, and I shared what I was dealing with. Of course, they didn't judge me. I came back the next week and the week after and so forth, and it'd be 2 weeks, and there'd be another new guy in class who had just been 3 days clean. And that was like wind in my sails, just hearing other guys say, I'm right behind you, or I was on somebody else's coattails, A month later, the day after Father's Day, I got up and got a blue chip to put down pornography. That was 6 years ago. God showed me that I could trust him when I made it 30 days without alcohol. Like how David, he knew he could trust God when he went to fight Goliath. How did he know? He knew because God was with him. When he killed the lion and the bear. He did that before he killed Goliath. It felt like when I gave him alcohol in one hand, I had porn in the other hand or behind my back. And when it was time to give it up, I knew I could trust him. I was able to hold my hand out and give it to him. And that's all it took. So I'm not encouraging dating or being in a relationship as a part of recovery. In fact, steer clear of it. There's no one else that's going to deliver you, and no one else is your Savior. You got to do recovery by yourself. But I decided finally to go out with Victoria after she kept texting me. No. After she was in my DMs. No. We talked. I was interested. For me, at that point, I wanted to date to marry. Not like, oh, now I'm recovered, but I didn't want to fool with anybody just to be, to be dating. I didn't want to waste anybody's time and whatnot. So anyway, where's my hat? Yeah, and I think that's next. Okay, anyway. So we dated. We had boundaries. She knew what my issues were with alcohol and pornography, and if you do have an issue with pornography, she wasn't my accountability partner by any means. So if you do struggle with some sort of sexual habit or whatever, do it with same-sex accountability partner. Okay. Anyway, can't be you have to be accountable. What I'm just saying. Okay. I got this. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. All right. So we dated for about a year, and by the May 22nd of the next year, we formed the JD Bunch. Yeah, like the Brady Bunch, only JD. Okay. So, all right. And so that year, let's see. I'm running out of time. All right. See if I can take just a few more minutes. All right, so we got married, and then so the next Mother's Day we went and visited my mom in Searcy, and it was a COVID year, so we were sitting outside, and I didn't want the sun on my head, so me and Pops. Oh, that's my stepdad. Pops is my stepdad. He came into my life when I was around 8. So anyway, we went in and got this hat, and so there's a picture of us being around and me in this hat. So I've been wearing this hat around ever since. It's just a cool hat. I'm sure y'all agree with that. So I don't know where you can get one, but you might check. Is it Montana? Wyoming. Check Wyoming. All right. So anyway, let's see. So I was sober a year. That day I got this hat, so I remember. But so y'all are getting sober, want to be sober. You have a purpose for being here. Maybe you haven't even. When I stepped in, I wasn't even 24 hours sober. So anyway, it's not the end of your story. That's just where it begins. Once you get sober, you haven't made it. That's just the beginning of the rest of your life. I'm sure y'all have heard something similar to that. So now what? Find out what other areas you need to move forward in. Take that one extra step. We're part of the membership and more class here at the Rock, and so there's a spiritual gift test that all the members or whoever takes the class, we get them to take a spiritual gift test. And is it a disc test or something? Okay, so it's a disc. Anyway, I don't know if you've ever taken one or not. I really haven't up until past, I don't know, year or two. But anyway, I would encourage you to take one of those. You can ask one of us. We can get you help. Excuse me. You may even just be able to Google it. But anyway, but that's a good indicator of what your strengths are, And so anyway, I put that in here just to kind of encourage, somebody to move forward or whatever. So I didn't tell any jokes yet, but I normally have told a couple of jokes by now. But so this is my recovery joke. All right, y'all get ready. 2 guys walk into a bar. One guy looks at the other guy and says, "Ouch." Because he walked into a bar. It's a low overhead clearance, people. Yep. All right. So, if there's anybody that works at factory, you can give that joke in your safety meeting sometime or whatever. All right. So one guy says "ouch" and the other guy says, "Hey, you know what? That is dangerous. That did hurt. Let's do something about it. Let's warn other people about it." Because they're not the first people that walked into that bar, whether it was literally or figuratively, okay? And they're not going to be the last ones to bump into the bar, but at least the idea is, what can I do to warn others about it? You're not going to stop people from doing the inevitable, but anyway, what are we doing? What are we doing? Okay, let me see where I'm at in my timeline. Okay. A couple of years ago in August, it was the end of August, I got a phone call Saturday morning from my mama. I said, "Jason, you got to get up. Pops went to sleep to bed last night, and he didn't wake up this morning." And like I said, that was 2 years ago. So I proudly wear my Pops hat. He was he 84 or 86? The day before he passed away, he was out mowing the yard, taking care of the house. For the past 20 years, he's been talking about making sure Mom was going to be taken care of when he passed away. So, and I tell you that because being 6 years sober, something that I would normally run to the liquor store to escape from, I've been able to walk through it, and I feel like I honor him, because he knew all the stuff that I went through, and he never left my side. He always backed me up. He believed in other people too. So I want to say that about my Pops. And then that same, let's see. So that November, I'm going long. I can wrap it up real quick, I promise. Okay. So November of that year, my daughter and her fiance, two little lovebirds, they flew into our living room, and they got married in front of us and his parents. And the little skateboard punk took my daughter away from me. In fact, they moved to Kentucky, Kansas. They moved to Kansas 8 hours away. And then the next Christmas, we got gifts for Christmas. And this was my gift as a sober man in April, right? April. I had my first grandson, and I didn't have to celebrate at the bar or the liquor store or whatever. I've been able to experience these things alcohol-free and porn-free and walking in victory. So I did want to talk about skateboards a little bit, but I'm running out of time, so I'm running past time already. So I want to just say this. Does anybody know who Russ Taff is? Christian gospel singer. Like, he wasn't really my kind of music growing up or whatever, but I still like the guy and like some of his music, whatever. But I saw interview with him sharing his testimony. I ran across it a couple months ago, and I was enjoying listening to it. And there's 3 things that he said that when he said them, it hit me. First thing was that AA was the first place that I felt accepted. It was the first time in my life that I felt accepted. Like I said, he was a Christian music gospel singer. His dad was a pastor. His dad was an alcoholic pastor, got kicked out of churches and things like that. But y'all listen to his testimony if you get a chance. And this isn't AA, but it hit me because, of course, this is a recovery program that I'm involved in. I've never been to AA or NA, but some of my brothers in here, when they share, that's one thing that they share about when they get out of prison. They went to AA, and they're 20 years clean. They did steps that got them to where they are today. So the second thing was, until you deal with your childhood trauma, you will never stay sober. He learned that, going through rehabs and whatnot. And one of the rehabs, they must not have been, Christian-based rehabs, which is whatever. But the last rehab he was at, he, identified his higher power as Jesus. And so the therapist told him, you better bring Jesus with you because you're going to need him. So the last thing I'm going to tell y'all is you better bring Jesus with you because you're going to need him. This is where you're starting, not where you're finishing. Thank you for letting me share.